Okay, so if you're getting started to make your business card inside of Photoshop, the first thing I do is I just Google business card dimensions, and all this information will come up for you just so that I can remember the exact size. And here's a really handy piece of information right here, is that the finished card size is 3.5 by 2 inches, but you need a bleed edge of 3.75 by 2.25. Basically because when they go to print them, they'll be trimming or cutting the edges of your card. So you want to make sure that your text is in the safe text area on your card so that when they go to cut it or trim it, it's not going to trim off text. So just make sure you give it a little bit of a bleed when you're setting up your file in Photoshop, which I'll go over with you. So I have Photoshop open. You're setting up as 3.75 inches by 2.25 inches, and make sure your resolution, this is the important one, is 300 pixels per inch for print outputs. Okay, so I've got my card set up, and now I'm going to open up my PNG file that I set up and bring those in. So now I've opened up my PNG documents. I can just drag that off to the side, and then I can go and then I can drag those over here and have them wherever I want on the card. So my PNG documents have opened up larger than the background. So I'm just going to go to Edit, Transform, and adjust the scale, or go to Free Transform. So that is Command T on the Mac or Control T on your PC. So I'm going to hit Command T. Grab the edge, hold down the Shift key to change that proportionally, and then I have both versions of my logo. And I'm going to settle on this one, so I'm just going to go to the Marquee tool, Marquee, select this one away, Edit, Cut, or Command X, and cut that one away. So I'm happiest with this one. The next important thing I want to do when I'm setting up my business card is making sure that I've got some bleeds set up here, right? So what I'm going to want to do, if you don't see the rulers already, you want to go View, and you want to make sure that the rulers are selected. In this case, I already have the rulers selected, but if I deselect it, you can see the rulers have disappeared at the top and the sides. So if I want to go View, Rulers, show those rulers, and move this off to the side here, go to my Move tool here. If I click and hold on the ruler and drag over, then I will get something called a guide. It's this blue line. So the guides are similar between Photoshop and Illustrator. They come up as these blue lines, and they don't show up in any of your print output documents, or if you were to save this as a JPEG or PNG, you will not see your guide. You'll only see it in the Photoshop document. So I'm going to click at the top. I'm going to bring down a couple guides from the top. I'm going to bring one more guide over from the side. InDesign sets up the guides preset for you. That's the exact ratio. I just sort of eyeballed it in Photoshop or Illustrator. This is about the space that I go with. You can adjust your logo in a safe area there. So you can go over to your text, go up here, click a text color, black is fine for now. Click and drag and say your info goes here. This is not the text that I want for some file that I was set up before. Obviously, has some futuristic slant to it. So I always, whenever I'm planning something, I just default to Arial. When I'm quickly setting up a document, I just default to Arial for the time being and get all my information kind of laid out in Arial, figuring out size, ratio, and all of that business. I'm going to make a copy of this. Info goes here, and then I can start figuring out what info I want going in those spots, and then start going through various font choices after that. The next thing I kind of do is set up a color scheme, or thinking about like where I want different bands of color. So picking up this color here, I will go to my eyedropper tool right here, click on that color, and then I will go down here and make a new layer. I like sticking with basic shapes, so I find just going to the Marquee tools here fast and easy. So I'm going to go and click. I'm going to drag a Marquee tool over on that new layer. Got this green selected, and then go here to my paint bucket tool, fill that in with a solid color, Command D to release that. I'm going to drag this below the text information here, so that's a little bit too big of a ratio, so I'm going to go Command T. I'm going to decrease the size of that band, and then I'm going to take that text, move the text down, and that's looking pretty good. I like how picking up the color from the logo and connecting it to the band works for now. I may also try a second version of this color as a gradient. So I'm going to make a new layer here. So now I'm going to go down to this layer here. I'm going to press and hold the control key on your PC, or press and hold the command key on the Mac, and click that. It loads that selection. Okay, so I have that selection loaded. I'm going to go up to the blank layer here. I'm going to go to my gradient. make sure that the gradient is selecting the gradient with the color down here, not that's on all these other random gradients. Make sure you're selecting that one right there. And then I'm going to click and I'm going to drag that gradient across there and see what that looks like. And I could also click and drag the other direction or the top direction. So then I can go with my gradient and then try different variations of that. So I could set up another layer here, go down here, Command or Control click, go back to this gradient here, and then click the other direction. Let go of that. And now I've got all these different variations. I've got the solid one down here and then my other variation of the gradient there. And then I can go and make some visual decisions on where I want the rest of the business card to go. And now the next step is to start laying out your actual information. And then I will start playing around with different font styles. Okay, so then you can start playing around with different font styles, various sizes. And here's a quick tip for visualizing those. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to make that a little bit smaller. Then I'm going to go and then I'm going to make another copy of that, drag that down here, hover over this, pick another version. So basically what I like to do when I'm trying to figure out a font choice for my business card or page design, I'll go through and say, okay, here was my overall look for the logo that I'm going for. Here's the overall color scheme. Here's the vibe or the feel that I'm going for. And what kind of font do I need? And there's lots of font families. So then I'll just go and start laying them out on top or underneath of one another and figuring out what one is going to be my final one to go with. Because the letters here are fairly thin, I think another sort of thin, sleek kind of lettering would actually go nicely with the card, but you may make another decision. So this top one here seems a little bit thin. I like how this one here is a little bit thicker, but still fairly thin, because I do want the information eventually to stand out. So who am I? What am I doing? I'm an artist, educator, and filmmaker. See what that looks like under there. I'm going to turn this off here. Maybe that goes there. So anyways, the placement and direction of your information is now the next step. Okay, so then as I'm setting things up and thinking about where I want to put information, I always really like Googling business card examples to see if I can get some ideas. I know obviously that seems like a pretty obvious choice to make, but it is something that I like to do, just to go around and see different versions. And you can see a lot of them do follow this, picking up a band of color here, a band of color there, and placing things around in this grid format. Even when they're trailing off of the grid format, they're still sort of laying things out in quadrants, or you can kind of tie everything into that kind of grid. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take all of the bottom bands here. I'm going to shift select all those, and then I'm going to click down here and I click this folder and pop everything into what I call it a folder, they call it a group. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this group bottom line, for lack of a better thing to call it. I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to make another layer here. I'm going to follow that same thing, but maybe I'm going to put the band along the side here. So try this again. Follow the same steps. I can fill that in there, and maybe I like it off to the side better than that. So I'm going to repeat these steps. I'm actually maybe even going to make another layer here. So now I'm going to Command or Control click, select the top layer here, go over here, and I've already kind of selected a slight darker area of the green, but within the same color spectrum, and then fill that in a little bit darker. And then I can make some quick decisions whether I like it darker or not. Make another layer here, Command click, go to the gradient, make sure that that's selected, pull the gradient from the top down. I can keep moving that gradient down, make another version of this, Command click it, pull the gradient off from the side, and there you have it. And so then once I've got all those different versions of the side line, I'm then going to go shift select all those, click the group or the folder here, call that sideline for lack of something else to call it. And then I can just quickly turn these off, turn these on, and you can see how I can make some visual design decisions about where I want it to go, or put both of them like that. If that's kind of cool, I might even go to this folder here and adjust the opacity of the entire folder and start playing around with things like that. And then you can turn these folders off. So make a new layer here. Another fun thing to play around with is the polygonal lasso tool. So I could click in this corner, and the polygonal sets it up as when I do my next click, we'll lock the line in, click that around. And then I can go start with my paint bucket. So maybe I would like something as a angular side rather than a square side. And then I could follow all those steps again and try adding a gradient to that. And then I could go shift select all those things I've made there, put those in a group. And now you're coming up with visual ideas for your business card. So I've got the angle line, I've got the side line, and I've got the bottom line. So hopefully this gives you some ideas about how to get started and making some visual decisions to your business card. Start with a color scheme, think about colors you like, start with a simple logo, and then build off of that, and then start with simple shapes. A bottom line, a side line, an angle line, or then take your bottom line here, take your side line, and remember with the side line, I adjusted the opacity down to 66, so maybe you want like overlapping lines. Maybe I need to adjust that down a little bit more. This is the format that I use when I'm trying to figure out where to go, how I want to get started with a business card or page layout.